Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day today. We're going to delve into a little known ranch that is basically the Skinwalker Ranch of Colorado. And this was news to me. Jay, have you ever heard of this place?
Heard about it a little bit when we spoke with Chuck not too long ago, but I'm not really familiar with the Colorado aspect of this. It's amazing that this phenomenon is taking place at other locations as well.
Yeah, and the phenomenon list is very similar to Skinwalker Ranch, where, it's not just lights or craft. There's cryptids, there's balls of light, Bigfoot, crop circles, people reporting hitchhiker effect. And we know that, the Skinwalker Ranch is not limited to this phenomena either, right? The whole Uinta Basin is a hotspot. We chatted with Avery Tafoya and the Hickory Apache Nation land. They're seeing it. So this is quite common. But we asked Katie to bring us some video and some imagery, which will be pretty cool to help kind of explain it a little better. And I think Linda Moulton House started this in the 70s with her reporting of Colorado cattle mutilation. So,
pioneer, eh? She's just pioneered this.
Yeah, and we're chatting with her soon enough too, and we're going to ask her about that. So Katie Paige is a member of MUFON. She's a podcast host, presenter. She's going to be a contact in the desert. Wealth of information, really intelligent, well-spoken lady.
Woman.
Yeah, I'm excited. And for all of you that have liked and subscribed to our channel, we really, really appreciate that. For those of you who haven't yet subscribed, just click that little red button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It does make a difference. We have so many comments from people saying, I wish I found you sooner. I was looking for just this kind of content. And we do our best to bring you the absolute best info, the biggest names, and we weed out the fluff. So we don't do the woo. We're science and fact-based. But if you could subscribe, it really does help. We do appreciate it. And let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, let us know. We respond to every single message, and we love hearing feedback. So with that, we're going to get Katie Paige from MUFON here. And let's roll the music, Jay. Let's do this.
I'm excited.
Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name's Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my best buddy, Jason Gilmet.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. It's been a cool week. We've put out a lot of episodes, and it's been super busy. Cattle mutilation talk and all kinds of, arrow hearing was a couple weeks ago. And so we wanted to bring a friend of our show back on again, Katie Paige. For those who don't know, Katie is an author and investigator. She's the MUFON State Director in Colorado, host of MUFON What's Up radio show. She's appeared on Coast to Coast, and she's also writing a new book. Her first book was Letters of Love and Light, 4 Decades of UFO Encounters, and now her new book is High Strangeness on a Colorado Ranch. So she's going to show us some cool video and some articles and correspondence about this. Essentially, this is the Skinwalker Ranch of Colorado, and I think that it needs to be more well-known. So welcome to the show, Katie. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I think we've been chatting with quite a few MUFON people lately. Jason's a MUFON member. We're always supportive. We encourage people to get involved. There's good and bad in everybody's opinion, right? Some shows slam MUFON. We're pro MUFON. Without MUFON, what would we have? Just the government
drama.
and Arrow? And I don't want to think about that. So
yeah,
right. No, there's a lot of great hardworking volunteers in Colorado and Colorado, Arizona, so many states. We do have states that are in need of state directors and their MUFON groups. So if you're interested in that, always reach out. You can find your local states and chapters on MUFON.com. But, we're all just volunteers, and we all have a passion, like-minded people. We meet every other Saturday of every month, once a month, and we bring in speakers, and it's just, it's a good organization. I've always enjoyed being a part of MUFON, and I like their scientific lean as well. I think that's important. History, documents, all that, super important in this field.
Yeah,
for sure. So tell us a bit about yourself and what got you interested in the field of ufology to begin with.
Yeah, like so many people, I think, when we're young, we're growing up and we have unusual things that occur to us, both in ufology and in the paranormal world, we question those things. And like so many people, you go through school, you get married, have children, go through college, work your degrees. And those things that happened were kind of always in the back of my mind, left unresolved, and really kind of got interested in ghost hunters way back in like the late 90s, and wondered all about those paranormal encounters because I had a lot of that going on as well in the family, in the house. And it's watching a documentary that I heard about MUFON for the first time. And I recalled all these unusual things that occurred on a ranch in Colorado. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'll become a field investigator. So when I joined and entered into MUFON, I came right in as a field investigator. And Doug Wilson was the state director at the time. And he was such a great, awesome mentor. So many people actually within MUFON mentored me and trained me and really I kind of joined for selfish reasons, just to investigate the ranch and what all that was about, because so many things happened out there. I mean, this was from the years 1975 to 1978. Linda Moulton Howe at the time was an investigative journalist out here in Colorado, and there was this rash of mutilations, which, by the way, they're amping up again. So it kind of started there. And what I really would like the listeners to understand is both my mom, my sister and I, my older sister and I, we were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened out there. We never knew anybody investigated it. We never knew anybody knew anything about it. It was just like this family secret, this heavy thing. And also, until Skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out, I kind of compartmentalized all these different phenomenon, the blue orbs, the paranormal things, the lucid dreaming, the psychic kind of stuff, the UFO stuff. And I put them all in these separate little boxes, the Sasquatch sightings, all this. And it wasn't really until they opened that all up. And, even Jacques Vallée talks about, this is a much deeper subject than, we're all led to believe. Like these are all intertwined and interconnected. And that's really what keeps me going, and to try and find these answers, like so many.
And it's an in-depth a thing. Louis and I, the more we do this podcast, we mentioned it several times now, but it is almost like a university course just to understand the basics of what's involved in ufology. And each different topic requires different experts, different qualifications to be able to solve that. And
that is so true.
And it intertwines with daily life as well, because not only does it impact people, if it turns out that the government does one day come out and say, hey, these things are actually happening, because even Katie, Louis and I were talking not that long ago, we were saying that if the government admits that these objects are in our skies and most likely they're non-human, that means all the other topics that we've been covering as ufologists for however long are valid as well, or will become valid at some point too. They'll have to come out and say, yes, the abduction phenomenon is a possibility. Yes, the cattle mutilation is a possibility, and bullet point after bullet point, right?
Yeah, so true. And you bring up such a good point. I mean, here in my library, you can't really see it, but all around me is just loaded with books and old magazines. And you can literally spend a lifetime just going back and reading and getting caught up on all the pioneers that came before us. And, in writing that book, Letters of Love and Light, the 4 decades of UFO encounters that were sent to R. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, who was a pioneer in the field for contactees, abductees, and past life regression out of Laramie, Wyoming. I learned through George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. He was actually out on the Elbert County Ranch property as one of the investigators, along with 2 other PhDs, Peter Van Arsdale and John Durr, PhD. He was a seismologist. So to learn that there were actually people investigating this property was mind-blowing to me. But what I learned in writing that book was in reading letters from people all around the world and getting to read Dr. Sprinkle's correspondence with other professionals in the field. It's like, oh my gosh, we're always constantly reinventing the wheel. Like when I think like, oh my gosh, this is a new discovery. No, it's not. They were like talking about it in the 60s. And I think that's the beauty of these podcasts and social media and the way we all communicate now. We don't have to spend all those years getting caught up, because everybody's communicating and talking so much faster. So we're getting, educated quicker.
And that's kind of the purpose of us doing this show. We want to give everybody a little snippet. We don't do 3-hour-long episodes. It's an hour. We cover multiple angles. We have our own opinions internally, but it's not for us to censor that, right? We're not here to only do episodes on things we think are cool. if we think there's plausible information there, if we've researched the person talking, we know they're legit, it's food for thought. You know, the viewers does what they want with it. The burden of proof is not on us. I think Ross Coulthard said when we interviewed him, the burden of proof's not on the journalist and the investigator. It's on the observer to make up their own mind.
Yeah.
Take it all in. Don't just take in the side that you like, because it's easy to kind of throw everything away that doesn't fit with what you kind of had, your preconceived notion. So it's important to take it all in. And you go down this rabbit hole. Now it's not just nuts and bolts craft. It's, you know, interstellar, and perhaps cryptids are related, and consciousness, and, you know, ghosts and all that stuff. Maybe they're not all separate phenomena, as you mentioned. Maybe there is, these are just multiple species, so to speak, right? As a very general way of saying it. This realm exists, and there's all kinds of stuff. And I wanted to ask you about the ranch, because a lot of people don't know about it. We're probably very familiar with Skinwalker Ranch, and that doesn't just happen at Skinwalker Ranch. In fact, the whole Uinta Basin and all those areas are a hotspot. And there are many hotspots across the U.S. and the world, really. So tell us a little bit about this ranch in Colorado. I know you've prepared some material as well that we think is super cool. So feel free to tell us about the ranch and show us what you got.
Well, first of all, you bring up another really great point. If somebody tells you they have all the answers to something, run.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
The Messiah complex that's in ufology is unreal. Yeah.
And some good people are going down that path. They're getting into the clickbait, the funny meme pictures. I don't want to say they're making a farce of it, but as a content creator, I feel like that. I know the viewers may not feel that way, but, you know, we kind of have our own ethical obligation, I think, to only put out good stuff. And when you see some of these guys that have the following, they have the people that love them, what they do with it is not so appetizing. But we're all in this. We're all trying to do the same thing.
And as we learn more, I mean, for me, just a little background on the ranch. It's important to know I didn't live there full time. It's also important to know this phenomenon wasn't just centrally located on that 60-acre ranch property in Elbert County, Colorado, in a small town called Kiowa. But it affected pretty much the whole range of Elbert County. And I had mentioned earlier, Linda Moulton Howe, there was a whole rash of cattle mutilations going on at this time, not only of cattle, but of horse and sheep. I even found newspaper articles about dog being mutilated, so different animals. But once I went to Dr. Sprinkle's archives and I pulled all the information and file from the ranch, you know, it started to become clear. And one of the first questions I had was, now, how much of this was Black access military projects that were going on at the time? We have so many military bases that are pretty close in proximity to Elbert County and the town of Kiowa and Colorado Springs. I think I showed you a map, or I sent you a map of the different military installations, but there's the Air Force Academy and Camp Carson. There's even Butte, which has one of the nation's largest collection of helicopters, which is a whole other phenomenon, is these unmarked mysterious helicopters. We can get into that. And this was it just spiraled into so many different areas of research. Both cryptid creatures, these large birds were spotted out there, Sasquatch creatures were spotted out there, ET beings, craft, light orbs, circles on the ground. I mean, humming sounds, these sounds and bangs, you know, what is that all about? And as you go through and you're trying to do interviews, it's so important as an investigator to, I mean, I know it's tempting, and a lot of the work we do in MUFON is, you know, looking at the laptop and going on Stellarium and Heavens Above and Flight Radar and all that. But it's also just as important when you have a really good case to get out of the house, jump in your vehicle and go interviewing, be on location. As many listeners know, you know, until you really physically get out there, it's really hard to investigate something properly, you know, and to face-to-face talk with people. Even Zoom, it's not the same as meeting somebody face-to-face. And so I really made an effort to track down a lot of these witnesses and I'm still finding them today, and do face-to-face interviews with them, you know, and go out there and research and really dig on what all of this means and why. And you're right, there's so many different places, you know, Skinwalker, Marley Woods, Trey Hudson, who's a great friend of mine, the South Skinwalker. And there's a really interesting case called the Ohio Pile Creature case. So out in Pennsylvania, you know, there's just so many of these areas. And I think David Pilates is doing some good work with these missing people and the missing 411 and tying in possible aquifers. So when he brought that up in his UFO connection film, I'm like, oh, is there that under the Elbert County Ranch? And sure enough, there sure is. Not only that, but two, right where the ranch sits, there's two aquifers right together. Now, I don't know how that ties in, and I'm not a scientist. I don't know what that means exactly, other than I know these locations tend to be highly magnetic locations. They tend to have water around them. And maybe it's just this magical combination of these things. Military bases are close by. What's up with that? I don't know. So all these different things. And as an investigator and a researcher, you have to be open-minded to whatever data comes your way and
100%.
whatever you learn, and be willing to change your mind and go a different direction, you know?
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's see. You got some, give us your slides there, Katie.
Okay.
Got some
Let me see if
videos,
I
some
can-
slide.
Let me see if I can do this without.
We're hoping you make it a light
Sure.
day at the shop for Jason and I.
You know, but
Right.
this is cool because this as a feature, you know, as people that are listening to this, their interest in this is as high as ours, and to be able to actually see research and charts and stuff like that, it gives us data.
Yeah.
And it is a really cool feature that we, you know, now that the podcast is a little bit more visual. If you're in audio only mode right now, you're missing out on the slides. We'll try to describe them as best as we can. But if you
Yeah.
get a chance, go on YouTube and check this out. This is really cool.
And Spotify has video as well now. We're running
That is
video
true.
on YouTube, Spotify. But yeah, we can talk about these places and have people envision it, but having you know, maps and testimony. And there's a few videos here of the undersheriff at the time in the 70s, and Linda Moulton Howe did do quite a bit of work with this back in the day, and it's like
Yeah.
Katie has taken that and continued this forward. So thanks
Right,
for this,
right.
Katie. This is awesome.
Oh, of course, my pleasure. I mean, that's what it's all about. And the more I share, and the more you and people, you know, that do these podcasts and these shows, you know, it's almost every single time somebody will come forward with, you know, either an encounter or an experience they had, or with information. So
Right.
it's really important to, you know, talk about it. I mean, what's the point if you don't? I researched for, you know, I think it was like year number 7. I'm like, well, I guess I should probably start talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to do it eventually. But hopefully everybody can see the screen. And the big red star at the top of the picture is the Elbert Ranch, where it's located. And the Black Forest is right under it, which the Black Forest has a lot of sightings in of itself. So that's interesting. And back in the late 70s, the Air Force Academy there to the left, the green star, their property kind of ran back up through the Black Forest into Elbert County. So they owned a lot of that land. And we do know through the archives and the research that there's no question that we were aware that the Air Force was the property and on the ranch itself. And I'll share a side with a soldier that was there from Camp Carson that I found really interesting. So you have, you know, of course, Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD is in Colorado Springs, Fort Carson, and then down below that, you have Butte, which has a lot of military helicopters. You have Scrivener and Peterson Air Force Base. So it's just surrounded out there. And you know, on the other side of the springs, you have Alamosa. And this in 1967 was Snippy the horse, which I believe Snippy was its sister's name. I think her name was Lady, but Dr. Leo Sprinkle was one of the initial investigators with Snippy the horse. So he was right there on the front lines through all these mutilations and stuff.
So wait, Katie, just so I get this straight, Snippy the horse is in the vicinity of this?
Yeah, it's on the other side of Colorado Springs. Yeah.
mind
And that's
blown.
interesting
That's
because
cool.
we just interviewed Chuck Zukowski about that, and he mentioned it. And for those who don't know, Snippy the horse was a horse that was found totally intact, but the long neck and head had been de-skinned, or the hide removed, and the flesh removed. So you have a perfectly normal horse, and then a skeleton neck and head, like right down to the bone.
Like it got dipped in acid or something.
Exactly.
Right?
Something dissolved all the flesh off the neck up.
Right. And, you know, as a researcher and investigator, there's so many rabbit holes to go down. And, you know, cattle mutilations for me was not my area of interest or specialty. I mean, really, that's to the experts. I consider Chuck Zukowski to be the lead expert on that phenomenon, along with Christopher O'Brien. You know, Linda Moulton Howe paved the way on that as well. So many great books about it. But for me, it wasn't a high interest to me until recently, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about these mutilations. You know, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was like, oh, mystery solved. These are all like the intestines exploding or something, like the cow gets gas and, you know, whatever. And I'm just like, wait a minute. That doesn't explain, you know, the cauterized incisions. I mean, the big thing is the lack of blood, blood being completely drained out, or missing tongues, missing ear, missing eye, all these interesting things. I'm like, why don't they take the T-bones? Why don't they take the fillet? I don't get that. I don't know, you know. And then of course there's, well, no, it's all the military doing that. It's all that. But through my interviews that I've done, and I'll share a story with you guys here in a little bit, there's some really high strangeness cases with these mutilations that it doesn't make sense that this would be human, you know, especially going on for all these decades, like eventually. And another thing people don't realize, in Elbert County at the time, so again, this is the late 70s, kind of aging myself here. I was a little girl at the time. I was a young girl. And people, there was the Cattlemen's Association. I found newspaper articles that were offering $10,000 rewards for anybody that they could catch doing, because everybody was on edge. This was happening almost daily out there. This was, you know, people had loaded shotguns by their door. You didn't go up to anybody's house at night without warning. You'd get shot. There were people out there actively looking to catch these perpetrators. You know, at the time they thought maybe these were satanic cults or something doing this. There were so many different theories, and nobody was ever caught. Nobody was ever caught. How was that possible after all these years? It's just...
Also, what I was going to say, Katie, is that we I think Linda was right when she called it a harvest, because these things aren't, we say mutilations, but they're harvested. The way that everything is taken from them is a harvest of some sort, and it's always the same organs, the same patterns, the same puncture wounds. Like there's a repeatable evidence here, and if this is evidence of whatever this phenomenon is, it is evidence,
right?
And this is a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone's looking for that evidence in ufology. Right. Where's the proof? Where's the proof? We have all this forensic proof, over 10,000 cases, police files in the US alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a 7-minute video actually that a friend of mine made, Dennis Faramuth out of Phoenix. I don't know if you guys want me to share, but it gives you a great background. And the first part of it kind of tells us a little background about the area, Elbert County, what was going on at the time. The second part is actually from an audio clips of an interview I did. I drove to Wyoming. Now, this witness, her family basically pioneered this little town. So if you go to the Elbert County Historical Museum, you know, you'll see her ancestors on the wall, right? So they have been ranchers for a long time, and ranchers know other ranchers. And when I went out there to interview her, her testimony was so profound, and they, you know, they had many mutilations on their ranches, and their friends had many as well. She actually pulled out her phone, and this is an actual photo she found. She's like, oh, you're not going to believe this. I found the picture of the calf, and she sent the original photos to me on Facebook. This was the one that was mutilated and blood drained and everything. The one on the right, sorry for the graphic nature, but this was a photograph she had of a coyote kill. And you can see the difference.
Yeah,
Coyotes,
absolutely.
Yeah, I know this is a little graphic, but coyotes will jump on the rear hind of a calf and just tear at it, right? And this was something completely different.
It's a puncture wound, right?
Yeah. But she had a couple amazing encounters. And what was fascinating, though, is she pulled out her phone and she goes, a rancher friend of ours just sent this mutilation just the other week. But they don't want publicity. They don't want it they don't report them. And this I found to be true when I was just back in Elbert a month or so ago. Same thing. These are still occurring. They're just not reporting them because it's been going on for so long. They know they don't want the stigma. They know nothing's going to happen. They don't get reimbursed. I think they can write them off on their taxes perhaps. But so oftentimes these ranchers just don't even report them anymore, you know, so.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
And they don't want looky-loos going there and turning their ranch into an amusement park, right? People that want to do, you know, private investigations.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I think this is a video here. Let me go to I think this is it here. Yep. All right, here we go.
U.S. Senator Floyd Haskell represented Colorado in 1975, when the rash of cattle mutilations were happening. Senator Haskell sent a letter to Theodore Rosick, a special FBI agent in Denver, expressing his concerns by noting the bizarreness of the mutilations, the lack of blood on the ground, the lack of footprints, and the numerous reports of unmarked helicopters. He went on to say,
"There had been reports of a helicopter that had mutilated cattle, and how several people had been chased by a similar helicopter."
The senator then closed by expressing his concerns about the investigation.
"It seems to have progressed little, except for the recognition at long last that the incidents must be taken seriously. It appears that ranchers are arming themselves to protect their livestock, as well as their families and themselves, because they are frustrated by the unsuccessful investigation. Clearly something must be done before someone gets hurt."
August 1975, a big meeting was held with 60 law enforcement personnel from 3 states and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The leader of the meeting was Sheriff George Yarnell of Elbert County, because his county had suffered the most mutilations of 55 at that time.
Probably 75, because I didn't have my license yet. And I graduated in 78. So we'd gone to a 4-H meeting. It was my brother and I, and some neighbors lived on 86, and my mom. I mean, mutilation stuff was high alert. I mean, you were watching the skies. George Arnell was always out and about in planes and everything, and you were just, if you saw any strange things in the sky, you were supposed to notify the sheriff's department. And it was just high mutilation time. And we were on our way home. We'd probably gotten 3 miles out of town when this huge bright light, and I always described it as the sun sitting on the ground, because it was, my mom pulled over. It was on the south side of the road. Right there as those trees start, huge, and it was bright, and it was just, I remember seeing what looked like a platform come out of it to the side. And so in my mind, from that point on, I thought, oh, they lift the animal in the air and do surgery and then drop it down. But I saw this lit. It was a lit platform that went off to the side of this. It just disappeared as fast as it was there, and it was gone. And like I said, no sound, no nothing. So we don't, there was a lot of sightings of the helicopters, but it was silent. My mom was so scared. That's why I knew I was not driving yet, because I had to drive home because she couldn't. And we did call George Arnell. They went out, exploring, but they never saw anything. So then you skip forward to 78, I would say. It was probably 78, 79. My husband and I lived outside of Rama, off of 86, Highway 86 South. So we're out there in the middle of nowhere. Didn't have a lot of close neighbors or anything there. He was out on horseback checking the cows for calves. I just remember him coming back, telling me, because we didn't have cell phones, and saying that we have a calf down. It's really weird. It's dead. The mom had just had it, but something had cut a square of fur off of the top of it. The skin was still there from what I recall. The skin was still there, and the fur just was in a perfect square. When we went back out there, when I went with him in the pickup, which probably the whole trip maybe took 30 minutes or something, they had been back, and there was a very clean-cut circle with organs removed. Like I said, that calf was just a brand new calf. He freaked out because he like something had been there and he caught him in the middle of the act or something. Because it's like, okay, they've come back and done more work to the same calf. Only blood was what was just sitting in the cavity. But I do remember that, and but there was no tracks, no drag marks, no nothing other than what he had done with the horse. It felt like you were being watched. We never saw anything in the air. We never saw any tracks. And this was off the county road, I don't know, a couple miles. It wasn't, it's like somebody stopped along the county road and did something. We've had coyote kills before. I've got a picture of one of them. The calf was still alive while the coyote was eating on it. They don't just cut a clean circle and take an organ out. Just like a laser, which everybody's always described it as, just like a laser sharp cut. And the only other things that we noticed over the years of having friends and family and different ones that had mutilations, it seemed like the cattle in the pasture where the mutilation was seemed to act fine, but the ones in adjoining pastures were freaked out. One time we thought it was the military and doing research and things, and then at other times it's like, you know, this is just too strange, and too many people I've talked to have seen lights and an area between Laramie and Fort Collins, and we thought, what the heck was that? And we didn't know if it was a meteor that crashed or something that just like flew through the air. And there's so many unknown things that I don't know, it's almost scary to ever find out the truth. You know, you hear so many stories and see things, and it's just, I don't know, it's kind of scary. I know what the things that I've seen and witnessed and the different stories I've heard that I think I'm just left with it's unknown.
Yeah, so
Wow,
interesting.
thank you for
She
sharing
said-
that with us. That was
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, she said something that really struck me, and it's from the thing I remember the most was that sense of being watched.
Yeah.
And that followed me home. You know, from the ranch property, we lived about 45 minutes to an hour away in Englewood, Colorado. And the two younger boys, there were 3 sons that lived on the ranch. The 2 younger boys lived with us during the week. My mom was dating their father for several years. And so we had a large school district in Englewood, Cherry Creek High School, which was one of the biggest, best schools in the state. And they wanted their sons to have the opportunities of that large school district. So they lived with us during the week, and we'd drive back and forth from our home to the ranch on the weekends, taking the boys back to visit their mother. And so that's kind of how I fit into that puzzle of the ranch. But what's interesting is a lot of the phenomena that I compartmentalized and put in these different boxes happened to me at my home in Englewood, not on the ranch property. Although both my sister, my mom, and I all had experiences on the ranch. You know, I also had things that basically have attached to me. And I think that's an interesting part of this phenomenon. And I think that's something that really needs to be investigated more. I just recently had the opportunity to revisit the ranch for the first time since my childhood. I spent, you know, a week with a film crew out there. I can't say non-disclosures until later, but what I learned and what I took away from that was whatever is out there, it seems intelligent, number one. It seemed to know that I was back, which is quite terrifying. Even though this happened so many decades ago, so many things happened while we were out there. And to me, you know, and meeting the family, so the family that lives there now, wonderful people. And it's really interesting to me, you know, they've experienced some things, but not to the degree that was happening then. But we revisit the ranch, I'm there, and all of a sudden, all this stuff starts happening. And I'm like, what is going on here and why? And not only that, luckily I stayed in Castle Rock in a hotel during the filming. I didn't have to come here later by myself. But even when I got back, paranormal things started happening in this house. Why? What is that? You know, and so many contactees and experiencers talk about how this turned into a very spiritual awakening, a wonderful, good thing in their lives. And that, there's that feeling that most of the life out there in the universe is probably good, and they want what's good for humanity and the earth and us as humans. And for me, when I was young, of course, when you're a child, the boogeyman scares you. It was a very, very scary experience. And then being told not to talk about it and to keep it a secret. I mean, so much so where me and my sister like created our own little, like almost pig Latin language so we could talk to each other about it, and I never slept alone. And I was always feeling like I was being watched, and I was always running from cars and motorcycles because I felt like I was going to be taken. It was a very terrifying time. Now that I'm older and I'm processing and I'm researching, and maybe that's part of the process of why I'm researching it, to take some of that fear away, because when we understand things better and we can look at it logically, and then all of a sudden it's not so frightening anymore. And I'm not denying that there isn't the spiritual awakening truth, because I've definitely seen that in so many people, where it'll start out as something quite frightening and misunderstood. I mean, if you're being abducted and taken against your will, that's not a nice thing to be doing. But eventually people almost feel like special, or like they have a purpose or a mission they need to accomplish. And even Dr. Sprinkle talked about that, these different stages of contact or abduction. So, all of that has been an interesting process. And in researching this ranch too, I think people forget too, and I'm kind of thankful I took some time off writing the book, because now all these new things happen that I'll be able to include in the book. But it's like you write, you research, and then you process. You write, you research, you process. You write, so it's this whole kind of cathartic thing that I've been going through for a decade now. But anyway, so this is just a little clip before I share my interview with Bill Waugh's youngest son and his widow. I flew to Florida to do a face-to-face with them as well. Fascinating interviews and wonderful, wonderful people. She was wonderful, Bill Waugh's widow. He was the undersheriff of Elbert County at the time, in Linda Moulton Howe's film A Strange Harvest. She interviews him, and his wife comes out with this big folder of it was actually in that little movie you just watched, of all these newspaper articles she had saved all these years. And I'm like, oh, can I take those and copy them? And she let me take them home and copy them and all that. So that was really cool. And I got so much information from those articles. But anyway, so let me play this little clip here from A Strange Harvest, which again is Linda Moulton Howe's. And this whole film was about the mutilations during this time. So it's really interesting. I think you can probably Google it and find it somewhere to watch it.
Another law enforcement officer who saw strange lights back in 1975 and 76 is Bill Waugh. Bill was the undersheriff in Elbert County for 8 years, working with Sheriff George Yarnell. He retired in 1979.
Posseman and I was sitting out there one night. The sheriff was up in a plane, and I happened to look in the rearview mirror, and I saw this orange ball of light come up from the ground. So I nudged the deputy, or the posseman with me. We jumped out of a car, and this light came at us. It was up off the ground, flying higher than the car. And they get up just about to the car, and they make a complete 90-degree right-angle turn. And in the cockpit, I could see 3 little lights, a red one and what looked like a white one, and either a green or a blue. One man looked out of his window at night just before he went to bed, and a horse was standing out there. He got up the next morning, sat down to breakfast, and happened to glance out, and the horse had been mutilated. Right there. It was in the summertime. They had They had a house and 2 trailers where people lived in, and they all had their windows open. They had dogs around the place. No one heard any dogs barking. No one heard a thing. And that was right up by the house.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And like we talked about, it was not only cow, but horse and sheep and dog, and people were afraid they were going to go to humans next. I mean, like people were on edge. This was a really, really intense time. so much so the Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. And another interesting thing in getting out there and doing these conferences and stuff, couple of people I met, one was in Laughlin. I got to meet Richard Doty. And for those of you who don't know, Richard Doty was sort of, his job was to be kind of a disinformation, misinformation officer, right? Give some truth, but also like steer away to distract from whatever secret projects they were doing at the military at the time. And I asked him, I was really curious to know if he was aware of this property in Elbert County. And he said, he said, absolutely, they were. And I found that to be interesting. He also told me that, if I wanted to find out more about these two A-7D interceptors that had crashed in pursuit of a UFO, to go ahead and send a FOIA to Kirkland Air Force Base Mishaps Office, which I did. And I received that back. I could share that with you really quickly. It was really, it's right here. But it's, it's a lot of information. A lot of it's redacted out. But what that's all about, let me find those slides. I'm not sure where they are here.
I'm just going to say here, this is amazing, Louis, because here we have Arrow, the resolution office, who shows us very little and quite frankly would rather be at somebody else's problem. And here we are sitting with Katie Paige, and she's going through all this research, which is more than what we get from the government when they do briefings or declassification of things. It fascinates me that they always start from fresh. You know what I mean?
This is 40-year-old information, some of these articles, right? This is not, there is a huge, even if they just went with the public record, they could produce more in the hearing than they're saying they have.
It's
and we know
unreal.
the military has more
It's
than the public.
unreal.
Yeah, military's got more than
frustrating. Yeah. And that's what's so frustrating to watch these hearings.
Yeah.
They don't know the history of ufology. They don't know anything.
They always start from scratch, Katie. From scratch every time. And they always grab an idiot that doesn't know anything about the subject. Like, here, you handle this. It's like, why not go? Like, it's, oh, man.
Yeah, they just don't know. And maybe it's not of any fault of their own. All these phenomenon, they've been buried, they've been compartmentalized, they've been, mocked and ridiculed, and this is silly. And so it's a whole thing. But really, they need to get up to speed on these topics and all these different parts or, different things that were happening and still are to a degree. And that's what's fascinating to me. And I'll get into that as we close this off. But really quickly before I go to, these are some of the articles that that Bill Wall's widow had shared with me. Helicopter menaces girls related to stock beetle. These were all in Elbert County. So I asked Richard Doty, I'm like, why would these helicopters, these unmarked helicopters, be chasing young kid, like teenager kids, like scaring the tar out of these? And he said, as a distraction. A distraction for what? What are they doing? So the question was always chicken or egg, right? Were they out there investigating the unknown, who, these mutilations and all these other strange things that were happening? They were aware of the Sasquatch in the area and everything. Were they out there trying to figure out what's going on, or were they out there causing it? Which came first? Or was it a combination of both? I don't know. That's always been a question I've had. But this was a research study. It's an interesting little booklet I came across called The Choppers and the Choppers. And this kind of was research done looking at the mystery helicopters and animal mutilations. And they went through and took all these reports, and there were hundreds of them. And, 207 events here. They, by month, what months are more active, what days of the week are more active, day or night.
August 1, right? So yeah, August seems to be the listeners. Yeah. August
nice
is
warm
first.
Summer days. And
October 2nd. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So from basically August to October is more activity.
And Monday and Thursdays look like hot days.
Right, which is so
Stay
funny.
home on Monday and Thursday.
Freaking Mondays.
If you go out to Area 51 and you want to watch the skies, those are days to watch, right?
That's
Mondays
awesome.
And Thursdays. But look at these different states, because these mutilations, they were occurring, across the Midwest. You had a mutilation happening in Montana and one in Colorado almost at the same time. So these different police departments were communicating with one another And they had like maps in their offices of these different mutilations and tracking when and where they were happening. So you have one in Montana and one in Colorado, same day, same time. Like, why is that happening? But you could kind of see here, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado was definitely hit the hardest there. Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, and on down the line. So that was a really interesting. I'm going to talk about this real quick. I don't have time to share the whole presentation, but no, I will be at Contact in the Desert giving this presentation. There's going to be a whole bunch more added to it. So I hope to see you guys out at Contact in the Desert. But anyway, so these were this was Dr. Sprinkle's handwriting right here. And this says, Bill Wall, the undersheriff, wants to talk to someone. He has seen ships going into the ground, boxes and mutilations being done. Nobody will talk. He doesn't want investigation because of the publicity. He doesn't want the stigma. His credentials are an important factor. John would go back. Now, John is the gentleman who was the man who lived at the ranch, okay? NORAD colonel said bluntly to forget about it and to shut up. The Air Force head has a directive to handle UFOs and Bigfoot. What's really interesting about the Sasquatch creature seen out there, Elbert County, it's a pretty rural area. It's not very mountainy. It's not like squatchy. I hate to use that word, squatchy. But, you know, there's these big patches of like ponderosa pines, right? Mm-hmm. But yet these Sasquatch were seen out there. Not only that, they were like banging on things. They'd stand behind the barn. They collected hair. They collected footprints. They seem to me, and this is just my opinion, and I know it's controversial, and there's a really good book by Stan Gordon that kind of also says kind of the same thing. I feel that these Sasquatch creatures in this instant were connected to the craft. They were connected to the UFOs. It was all one phenomenon that was going on. I don't know if they were like bodyguards or workers or if they were the actual ETs themselves. I mean, why couldn't they be ETs themselves? Yep. A whole race from a different, I don't know. Yeah. But I'm just saying out there, it seemed like they were connected. So I'm going to play this again, this interview.
Before you move the slide, though, look at the very last bullet point. And what year is this from roughly? Are we talking 70s?
Around 76, 77.
Okay, so as of 1976, the Air Force head has a directive to handle UFOs and Bigfoot. So this talk of, oh, we're just starting to investigate now, the government's starting to take it seriously, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
No, in fact, let me find it. So David Marler, who, he's my hero of ufology. He, has his big archives, historical archives out there outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I've done some research, at his place a few times. And I'm digging through his things, trying to find things from this decade. It's my favorite decade to research. And I come across this. The North American Air Defense Command, NORAD, has acknowledged publicly that an unidentified flying object was tracked on radar and jet interceptors were scrambled after it. And this was like, I don't know how many pages this thing was. It was several pages. This was out of Canada, actually. Go Canada. So our NORAD facility there in Canada. And so early in the morning of November 11th, 1975, so right around the same time as Elbert County, they scrambled an interceptor. So I'm like, oh my gosh, they're admitting that they did that. And in this document, it stated that they did an article on it. And Dave's like, oh, I bet I have that article. And he's all organized in his file cabinets. And sure enough, we pulled it out and there it is. Air Force scrambled jets to intercept UFO.
Dave is unreal, isn't he? Like he's unreal. Yeah.
Was that when the National Enquirer wasn't a tabloid mag, or were they still
no, I think they were a tabloid, like, oh my gosh, nobody took National Enquirer very seriously. But now looking back, I'm like, wait a minute, we were bamboozled. A lot of this stuff was true. So that's really interesting. So I know I'm kind of skipping around here, but this was, you can see the redactions. But what's interesting about this, so 2 interceptors in Dr. Sprinkle's archives said they crashed in pursuit of a UFO. And I'm like, well, certainly there must be an article about that. And I found the article, I got the date, and I FOIA'd about these things. And what's interesting is one of the causes, and there were several, supposedly it was an instructor and a student that were scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base outside of Elbert County at night with 255 live rounds of ammunition over residential areas over Elizabeth and Elbert County. And one of the causes, it says right here, the instructor pilot misidentified the rotating beacon of another aircraft as the student's aircraft. Nowhere else in all of these pages does it identify what that aircraft was. It doesn't say it was a Cessna. It doesn't, even in the transcripts from the tower, it never identifies another aircraft in the vicinity. So I found that to be suspicious and unusual. Both pilots ejected, both pilots survived. So if you're out there and you're seeing this video,
Yeah.
anyway, so that just goes to show you, here's the original article I found, how important research is to go and do the work, to do the digging. I found that article there, November 12th, 1975. Sure enough, these two interceptors collided. And in Dr. Sprinkles, it says they were in pursuit of a UFO and to find, here's the original thing from the report. I also understand the two National Guard interceptors were up, and then it's redacted, and went down in pursuit of a UFO at night. All of this was a little unnerving, so I was going to stop my own inquiry. I was just going to quietly mind my own business. That's from the sheriff. That's a quote from the sheriff.
So we're not colliding with these objects necessarily in midair, but we're colliding with ourselves trying to chase these objects in midair.
Right.
All right,
Yeah.
gotcha.
They collided. And also on the report, it stated that the instructor, the student had turned off his beacon light, and so the instructor hit the tail, and they both went down. So both ejected, both pilots survived. So there's that. So this was interesting. Again, let me play this little audio clip back to this again. I know we kind of diverted off of there a little bit, but this is Bill Waugh's son talking about what he remembers, and he actually remembers going to NORAD with his father. So this is that little interview here. It's 2 minutes long.
Day, and it was in the daytime, and a helicopter, one or two of them, took off from our back field. And the thing about helicopters, they make a lot of noise and throw up dust. But they took off. But I remember Dad got in touch with NORAD, and I think I rode with him one time. But
you probably did.
He asked them to make sure to keep, the Army or whatever out of the county doing this investigations, because they didn't want anything going on. When people saw this, I mean, you could tell a helicopter from something that does not make noise. And they had Stapleton Airport at the time. They would work with the tracking and the radar. They would send planes up flying around, and Stapleton Airport would tell them, it's like, you got an unidentified flying object directly below you.
With one of the ranchers, most of the ranchers had their own little plane, and they had notified the Air Force Academy out of Colorado Springs. They had notified Stapleton Airport to not have any flyovers at this particular time. And they were up and he was up in this plane. My husband was up in this plane. Right next to him came this, it was white, whatever it was, came up beside them, and they could see a black object sitting in the pilot seat. And they radioed Stapleton to find out who was there, and they said there's nothing on radar, and that thing took off.
I know one of the stories that he told me when they were up there, and it was Stapleton notified them that there was something unidentified flying next to him, and then it just disappeared off the screen, off the radar. It was gone. That's why their dad talked to the people at NORAD Cheyenne Mountain, told them to keep the helicopters out of the county at the time, because, ranchers, they will shoot
at them.
They'll shoot at them.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you just got to put yourself in the mindset of this town at the time. This is a small town, and it wasn't just Kiowa. Kiowa was the hardest hit, but you have Elizabeth and Rama and this whole area, just like the Uinta Basin, kind of. And what is causing this activity? Is it interdimensional? Is it the military? Are UFOs coming in? And I just don't know. And for me, I think as an investigator, as somebody who wants simple answers, like we all want to say, oh, they're all good, they're all bad, it's all military, it's all this. So I think it's just so complex. And I just think we're looking at so many different answers.
Well, what makes it really interesting is when you start looking at it and you think you apply logic and reason to it. it doesn't make sense, because the animal, when we were talking to Chuck, was saying that there's, and Louis, you mentioned this too, and when we spoke with him, is that there's, location A where the animal is taken, it's taken to location B, wherever procedures is done to it, then it's dropped off at location C, which is in the vicinity of location A where it was first picked up. But it happens so fast. Like,
Right.
the ranchers were saying how they had the video you played, how they had just seen the animal. All what was wrong with it was just a diamond cut square on it
a
with
little
fur
square
missing.
cut with fur. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they leave for 30 minutes, come back, whatever had done that to the animal came back and finished the job.
Right.
So
And-
it's weird. There's like a consciousness. You're aware, it's aware that you are there.
Right.
Right.
And in my mind, I just recently got to know and speak with Dr. Simeon Hine. He's out of Boulder, Colorado here, and he's a brilliant physicist. And, he does a lot of work with these crop circles, a whole other area that I haven't really gotten into. And again, we're fed, oh no, those are all man-made. They're not all man-made, not all of them. A great majority of them probably are man-made, but not all of them are. And there's really, even the man-made crop circles, Dr. Simeon was telling me that they can go in and look at the magnetic anomalies of even the man-made circles, and they're super highly magnetic. And then it got me thinking, these balls of energy or these orbs that some people claim may perhaps create some of these crop circles, are these same things mutilating cattle? Are they balls of light? Are they, because it happens that fast, and then you have that sense of being watched. Can something like that do something like that? Drain blood and I don't know. My mind kind of goes like, I don't know, but so many mysterious things. And I think there was, Chuck Zukowski might know the answer to this. Or Christopher O'Brien, I think, talks about one of the cattle mutilated was actually put on the doorstep of NORAD. I think that's in one of the books. I think there was one like under like a bowl under like a huge, the way they're found and positions are very unusual. Like it doesn't make any sense. Again, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, there's also been cases where the animals weren't killed, but were put in weird places. Like a farmer went out, was missing a whole bunch of bulls, and they were all stacked in a barn that was padlocked from the outside, like a jigsaw puzzle. Like they were all holding each other in such a way. And these are 2,500 pound animals, some of them, right? So they weren't killed or mutilated, but taken from where they were. And it's like almost like the entity or the intelligence is trying to mess with people.
Exactly. That's a sense I really got from researching this. Like there's so many weird things, and it's a sense of that. And that was out at Skinwalker. Yeah, they were all put in that trailer. What
do you
is
have that slide
about?
that was talking about the mind control, where somebody?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, can you guys still see the? Yeah, this is the MK. So this was in Dr. Sprinkle's notes again. Warren Blank, last name redacted, from Camp Carson. He visits the ranch. So number one, I'm like, why is there somebody from Camp Carson visiting the ranch? What is that about? That's my first question. But he felt something wrong. He wouldn't go into the woods. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him, and he could run back. And this did this to him 5 times.
5 freaking times.
Just messing with him.
Yeah.
Mind control? What is that? We haven't even got into like the disappearing boxes, which I didn't talk about for a long time, but these boxes were witnessed by several people, including the undersheriff Bill Waugh and his posse men out on patrol one night. Not only did he say he saw this lit box disappear into the ground, but the tree next to it disappeared as if they went into the ground. Several people on the ranch witnessed these boxes. I witnessed the box in the daytime. It was about 3-4 feet off in the tree line, and we were in the pickup truck. They had their dogs, and we were just driving around in the Ponderosa Pines, and this humming sound would start up, and it was loud. Sometimes that sound would get so loud you couldn't talk over it. That's how loud this noise would get. And we had pulled the truck over to get some things out of this little outbuilding there by the tree line. That humming sound started up, and the adult in the situation was like, get in the truck. I looked back, and 3 to 4 feet off the ground, of course, I'm 9 years old at the time, is this lit box. And it started making this like weird, like, have you ever stood under like an electrical power lines, like
like a hum,
like that, and the tone of it started to shift. We look back, they're yelling at us to get in the truck, and then I look over and that box is gone. Just like that, just gone.
Crazy.
And when John Schuessler learned of my connection to the ranch property, he very quickly bestowed upon me the original briefing document from that property. And it talk about validation of my memories, talks about, these boxes. And in one instance, it's not when I was there and I didn't witness this, but in the back of the ranch house, the adults witnessed that same box, and they claimed to have contact with the 2 different ET types that were out on the ranch property. I never saw ETs personally out there, but they claimed to have seen these 2 different ETs out there. And they said that those boxes were lethal, and they showed them this by having one of the Sasquatch creatures walk up to the box, and that tone started and it dropped it to its knees as sort of like a warning, like, don't mess with us. We're here doing our thing. We'll stay out of your hair. You'll stay out of ours. And, these boxes are lethal. So, and somebody came up to me at a conference and said, those boxes and these humming noises, do you think that they were like hypnotizing or doing something to the cattle to maybe, because you heard our one witness in Wyoming say in the pastures where these mutilations were occurring, the cattle were calm and they were all huddled together. In the adjoining pastures, they were all freaked out.
Right.
So were they using these tones, the sound frequencies, and these to like calm the cattle or communicate? Were they communication devices? Were they hypnotic devices? Were they mind control devices? So many different theories that could possibly, I have no idea.
But even, because even this gentleman here, Warren Blank, whoever he was, I mean, if we think about this, the fact that he would go towards the woods, like as if he was controlled under mind control, and then release, he would run back, who knows how far. And all of a sudden he would like, no, I need to come back to the woods. And he did this 5 times. I'd be crying by the end of it. Like, let me go. Right. What's concerning is that if they're able, and we've covered this a few times, where these things are able to control not only a person, but persons, meaning multiple. Sometimes it's either a dozen, it could be up to 100. Just people just mesmerized by whatever's happening. It's easy to do that probably to an animal as well. There's no sign of protest to these mutilations. It's like the cow is either knocked out and it doesn't know what's happening, or it's just there's nothing it could do, and it happens so fast.
Right. And the scary part to me is, they're in the reports and in my interviews, and I experienced it one night at my house coming back from the scariest night on the ranch, and that's where we had that disembodied electrical voice basically warning us to keep our mouths shut. Also was in the report, which was mind-blowing to see the actual quote from that. But and it was very mechanical sounding, like almost robotic, and all the power in the house was out, and it came out of every orifice in the house. We have allowed you to remain, your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, was that the military scaring us? And why would they do that? That's another theory. If it was the military trying to scare us, that property sat vacant for like 10 years. They could have purchased the property.
Yeah.
Why would they go through all this elaborate hoaxing and all this trouble to acquire the property, and for what? Like none of that makes any sense to me. But these guys being out there, the mind control kind of thing, it makes you wonder, like, so many things were reported, like people were paralyzed. I went paralyzed that night. The people in the ranch house were paralyzed. And if they have the ability to do that, that's pretty terrifying. And then you throw in, David Pilates' work with Missing 411, and then it gets really scary. Are they taking people? And the types of people they're taking, German physicists. I mean, what's that all about? That's, to me, that's terrifying. That could be connected to.
Yeah, and it's mental, because it depends on the person. Even here in BC, we had I think his name is Taylor Granger, or Granger Taylor, either or. I'm bad with names, but he was a person that was talking to people around town, saying he was receiving communications from aliens, but he was incredibly smart. He was rebuilding things in his yard all the time. He even built a flying saucer in his backyard, which he ended up sleeping in. And he was talking about propulsion and this advanced stuff. And he told his friends one rainy night that he was leaving. That was the last thing that they've ever heard from him, is that he said he was leaving that night. And sure enough, there was a storm that night, and there was a big loud bang. His car was found or was never found, I think. And he just disappeared off the map. He never reappeared again.
Right.
So,
That's what's scary. Yeah. That's where you're like, okay, I'm glad they're bringing the cattle back. Bring some of these people back. I mean, so this was really quick, and we'll finish this up here. This was an interesting email I got from Bob Salas. I, again, spoke with him at a conference, and he was telling me that, and basically he said, and also Richard Doty said, hey, you should FOIA the agricultural office of the Air Force, which is also very interesting. And I still need to do that. I'm going to get on that, I promise. But why the agricultural office, and is that tied into the mutilations? Another question I have. But he said basically in Cascade County in Montana in the 70s, he served on a special team secretly funded by the Department of Agriculture. So there it is again, and Richard Doty had mentioned that. The purpose of which was to determine the cause of many cattle mutilations, UFO sightings, and Bigfoot reports. He was asked many times to polygraph tests of airmen stationed at Malmstrom who had seen UFOs. In one letter, she states, I am an artist, and in 1977 was called to the sheriff's office to draw a picture of Bigfoot from an eyewitness who passed the polygraph. This is confirmation for your story. He also recommended this really great book, Mystery Stalks of Prairie, Unexplained Cattle Killings and UFOs in Montana by Keith Wolverton. But the photo next to the book, the one there on the right side, the one closer to the book, was in the file from the Elbert County Ranch. That was a Sasquatch creature seen on that property. It was in Dr. Sprinkle's archives. The one on the left was the one that Bob Salas sent me from Montana around the same year in Montana. I don't know about you guys, but look at the nose, the eyes, the mouth, the scarce little hair. Like the hair is not like super thick like you would think of a Bigfoot. You know what I'm saying? They're so similar in the way they appear. And when I was a little girl, my mom would refer to the Sasquatch seen out there on the ranch as white fuzzies because they were gray in color. They were not black or brown. They were gray. And she called them white fuzzies, I think, so I wasn't so afraid of them. Sounded less scary. So again, all these interconnected phenomenon going on at the time. And this was another thing, south of Rama, where that calf was mutilated, mysterious blanket of metal found in the field. And there's a photograph of it. And in this article, it says, it was taken to be tested, Who knows where this metal is, this metal material? It looks like nothing I've ever seen before.
Blanket of metal. It almost has, the mylar material that you see from the Jesse Marcel photo. That's what comes to mind. A blanket being something flexible and, of decent enough size. That's right. And what year is this? 1975? Yep.
Wow. 1975, July 3rd, 1975, during this whole high strangeness time, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Oh, here's the ETs. This one last thing. The image on your right with the tubes that come out, this was in Dr. Sprinkle's archives from the being that was seen on the ranch. He was very unusual looking with these wrinkles, these big almond eyes, but not the wraparound eyes like we so often see with the grays, wrinkles around the mouth. He had these tubes, this weird looking protective thing over his chest, and these spindly arms and these spindly legs. And I had invited a guest speaker to speak for Colorado MUFON like 3 or 4 years into my investigation of this property. And I had never shared this drawing with anybody. I just kind of kept it in my desk to see if I could ever find anything similar to it. And I'm sitting in the third row watching a gentleman named Sean Bartok, who wrote a book about a property he owned in Castle Rock, Colorado, during the same time. And come to find out, his property was 14 miles away from the ranch property of my youth. And the drawing on the left was the drawing of aliens they encountered during that same time. The heavy brow, same shape eyes. These tubes are in his neck, but he said they came out. And in fact, there is another drawing of Sean's where the tubes came out from the neck.
Oh, that's weird.
So these two drawings are from two separate people who knew nothing of each other, 14 miles apart, decades later. And they're really, really similar. So,
it's almost like something out of a like different dimension. Like it doesn't look alien. It's just its shape and the way that it's drawn looks.
Yeah.
Surreal.
I did a composite of the two because they're so similar. I overlaid them and kind of composited them together. And I'm wondering, to me, they look AI. Artificial intelligence, perhaps. And the reason I said that is because I was at the grocery store and I saw this and I thought, oh my God, the tubes, maybe that's what they were. Like, are they some sort of AI? And then I thought about the mechanical voices, that, the boxes, could they be robotic in nature? Because that voice that came through the speaker was very robotic in nature. So, so much. There's so much more. We didn't even touch on all the hitchhiker phenomenon and all that. It just goes on and on and on and on.
It's unreal.
And that's why I just, I'm doing this full time now. I used to have a graphic design studio and I just do this full time because I could spend the rest of my life trying to unravel this mystery, even though it was so many years ago. And what I just learned recently is, meeting these locals in the local bar. And another reason why it's important to actually get out and meet people. This is still going on to this day, even the Sasquatch. Somebody literally had their cell phone and my brother and I were out in Elbert County, we're hunting elk, and look what we captured in this photograph. And I was like, why aren't you getting rich off of this photograph? You could see the elk laying in the photo. So you have size comparison to this big Sasquatch creature in the photo. And this just happened.
He didn't give you a copy?
No, I'm going to go meet with him and his wife and do an official interview.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he's like, oh yeah. And then this was on the back of her property. It's this like blue beam of light. It was not a helicopter. It was not a plane, no sound, just coming down in the tree line. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This stuff is still going on,
Yeah. And it's, it's just a matter of time now before we have another huge incident. I think we're interviewing Sean Hurd tomorrow. He witnessed in 1997. Was it 97, right? The Phoenix lights. Yeah. And it seems weird, but 77, 87, and 2007, like it just seems like there's a repeated. Because in 77, so much UFO activity took place. I only remember that year because that's when Star Wars came out. Okay.
Me too. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Exactly.
Which is so funny because I'm a little girl thinking that's a documentary. All these years, it wasn't until just recently I was like, wait a minute, not everybody thought about that.
As fictitious as it is, it's still probably one of the closest movie to the actual phenomenon that there is. That. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's crazy. But so 77 was a huge year because even in Brazil, they were having those little orbs that were zapping people and making them anemic, and a couple people died. And I mean, it was just a very active year. So when I saw that Sasquatch drawing that you just showed us, and it said in 1977, I was called. I'm like, of course you did. Like, it's just crazy year. Yeah.
And I think it's James Keenan who had mentioned these cycles of it's almost like if you did a graph, like it quiets down, it amps up, it quiets down, it amps up. And I think James took a good look at that and kind of theorized that perhaps these are going with our solar cycles or the position of Earth and the magnetic fields, the magnetic anomalies, all these things. We need our, best and brightest looking at all these different connections that these high strangeness locations have. And I think that's why it's so critical. The Colorado Ranch isn't a very well-known ranch and it predates the Skinwalker Ranch. But there's so much documentation on it. There's so many articles about it. There's so many witnesses to it. There's that military connection to it. This ranch is an important piece of this puzzle. And I think it's so important that all these different locations really try to work together and not get so, I don't want to say commercialized about it, but sort of like, for me, it's finding the answers, period. Bottom line, it's all wonderful and great to write a book and go do a show or whatever, but that's the only way to get the information out there so you can gather more data and more information. And then at some point, I always joke about it, but it's really no joke because I've had a couple interesting encounters already with people that maybe are watching what I'm saying. And I say, if one day you ask me to be on the show and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm, baking a cake in my kitchen downstairs. You'll know something happened.
They got the Katie. They got her.
They got her.
No, but
You
I was,
got it.
yeah. So just quickly before we close, I was just going to mention, MUFON and the way things are right now with MUFON. We have always been a big supporter of MUFON. That's how I started with my investigations. And
Yeah.
although I haven't done anything with the organization in over a year, we still support them. We have people on all the time that are part of the organization, and we keep telling the listener, if you are out there and you want to join, regardless of where you are in the world,
Right,
MUFON will
right.
make it happen. You could
Yeah.
become active and actually do something and contribute to this investigation.
So
And
true.
but it's been hard because a lot of people, like, Louie and I do some podcasts and radio shows every once in a while. Well, I would say quite a bit these days, but there's a lot of people sort of poo-pooing on MUFON, and because we have this plethora of availability of this information from all these different sources, podcasts and all that, that it's easy to forget the people that were pioneers in this, and that sort of help establish a foundation for data and collecting data. And
Right.
so yeah, I just wanted to say, if you had anything to add to that, just because we fully support MUFON, and
Right.
they
No,
have not
I
done
totally
anything for
get
us
it.
to yeah.
I totally get it. I think that's like the double-edged sword of, we mentioned all the positive things of social media and podcasts, but there's also the downside to it too. And that's one of them, where you get, not so much misinformation, but I think I would like to tell people, like, the majority of people, the vast majority of people within MUFON, they're volunteers. They're doing it because they have a passion for it. They're interested in the topic, and they're really good, hardworking people. And that's been I've never met a person within MUFON, forget the drama at the top,
Yeah. Yeah.
through the years, but they're just really good people, just doing what they can. And another thing, being the administrator for the Mars project, which was, from 1969 to when we went to the case management system, all those paper reports, there was a team of 15 that kind of headed to redact all the sensitive information out of there, names, phone numbers, addresses, places of employment, medical, anything medical sensitive. And the goal was to make these reports available to the public, to share these reports, all of MUFON's archives, because I think some people get mad at MUFON, like, you're hoarding all this data, but you're not doing anything with it. And that ramped up again. Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Chuck Sikowski's sister, Bob Spearing, and a team of us were moving that project forward so we can meet that goal to actually get a lot of this data out. I think that's an important role MUFON has for the people. It's nothing that we want to keep hidden, because it's valuable research information. And maybe some people think you won't find a lot of answers in looking at all of these cases, but I think there is valuable data there that people can take a look at and, get the best and brightest looking at this data and do something with it. So, like any organization, you're going to have the drama, and you just got to keep your head down, do what you enjoy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, just directly when I joined, I think like a month later, Jen Arson case blew up, and I was like, man, like, I just joined the organization. It just looks bad. But I've been fighting everybody that has been saying something about it. I always try to defend the organization because it is the people like you and Shane that's coming on, like, it's the actual researchers doing the real work.
Stacy Wright in Phoenix. I mean, there's so many great people.
So many people.
And Mindy Talfest in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just out there doing what they love to do.
Yeah.
And they're all good friends. They're like a second family to me. And, then you have the whole government, they're run by whoever. And that may or may not be true. I don't know. I don't think that it is, quite frankly. But even if the government took a look, or ATIP, Lou Elizondo, whoever has looked at MUFON's data, I look at it from the perspective is we're flying secretive things up there. And it doesn't surprise me that they would be interested in knowing what people are reporting, because they want to know if we're reporting secret aircraft or secret drones or whatever. So it makes sense to me. And I think of it as kind of like a good thing. Well, good. They're like paying attention to what people are seeing in the skies. And we do need to keep secrets, right, from other countries. I mean, that's just part of the deal, you know? So I kind of,
Yeah.
Go back and forth on that whole thing.
Well, there's and again, it's within reason and
Right.
logic. Like, you know,
Yeah.
obviously I understand that there's flying crafts that are amazing, but when
Right.
people are reporting these triangles and with like the 3 lights on the corner, red light in the center, all over the world,
Right.
right? All over the planet. I doubt that the US is flying multiple size crafts like that all over the world to try to see if it's spotted, because if they are, they suck at it. There's just
Yeah,
too many
right.
people seeing them, right? So I understand there's a
Exactly.
secretive aspect to the military, but there's too much things flying in our airspace that don't make logic or reason to the Homo sapiens species, that
Right.
it defies our understanding of physics and reality. And there's no way that another adult, like we're all adults here, there's no way another adult has figured out how to make that and have kept it silent. There's
Yeah.
no way, right?
100%. And I came in kind of as a skeptic, or not so much a skeptic, but a lot of my thought at the time when I came in was this was probably mostly our military out there doing whatever. And it took me a lot of years to see a lot of these really fabulous cases where you're like, okay, wait a minute, this is not us. And I'll never forget, I don't know, it was maybe 6-7 months ago now, I took another trip down to Albuquerque to do some research at the archives, and Dave Marler, who by the way is the triangle expert, so I recommend his book on triangles on that topic, but there was 2 big boxes sitting on his table, and he's like, hey Katie, all of those reports in these 2 boxes are nothing but pilot reports, military and civilian pilots. And I just started like, whoa, you can't tell me there's nothing going on. Like, no,
Right.
no, there's
Yeah.
something going on.
And like I said, if it's military and they have that much, David Marler has that much information, they
Oh,
really suck
right.
at keeping secrets.
Right, exactly.
Or there's something else going on. Katie,
Right.
it's an awesome, it's just always awesome to have you on, and
Thank
we'll
you.
have you on again because there's just so much we can talk with you about. I mean,
Right.
this subject is so. I read a comment online not too long ago, Louis, that somebody said that UAP podcasts or related UFO podcasts run short and run out because there's nothing to talk about. And I was like, au contraire, my
What?
frère. Yeah, exactly.
There's always
There's-
lots to talk about.
Oh, there's plenty to talk
I
about.
gotta
so-
update you on everything that happened at the ranch when I'm able to. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well,
Changing
once
everything
your
in my mind.
production releases, come on back and let's chat about it.
Yeah,
And
for
we do want to
sure.
thank you. We know you're busy. You're doing a lot of
Yeah.
things, both with MUFON and Contact in the Desert. So thank you
Right.
for giving a bit of time. You're
Oh,
always
yeah.
welcome here. And we want to turn it over to our viewers. What did you think of today's episode? What are your thoughts on all this high strangeness associated? Leave a comment in the comment section. And if you're a fan of our shows, please do us the favor, like and subscribe. It really makes a difference. We're Canadian. I think YouTube's screwing us somehow. We're not getting the followers we should. I get so many messages from people saying, how do you not have more subscribers? So fairly new channel. Maybe it's just time. But if you could do us that solid, we do really appreciate it. And thanks again, Katie Paige.
Thank
Best
you
of
for
luck
having
to
me.
you. And we'd love to chat with you again soon.
And just quickly, Katie, where can people find you?
Oh yeah, they could go to Katie Paige, KATIEPAIGE.net or .org. Either one. And that's my website, and you can message me there.
Perfect. Katie, thank you so much
Right.
for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you.